Okay, so let's go over to YouTube. Go over to YouTube and we'll repeat. Yep, there it is. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll grab it. Now here's the big thing. Let's see what happens on the stream. So I'm going to put this, I'm going to push this out, and then I'm going to show it from here. Yeah, that way Lydia will see this full screen. We'll see it full screen, and the students watching the recording will see it full screen. So share the video. Right, so let's see.
Beloved coffee maker
Oh, your morning friend?
won't start. Well, when I plug it in and turn it on, nothing happens.
Okay. All right, so
Nothing whatsoever.
So
A repair cafe is a place where neighbors help neighbors learn how to repair. They can sit with a fixer, have a cup of coffee, have some pastry, and learn and watch how something is actually fixed.
It's like surgery.
it is.
What happens is, as a person rides, the brake pads wear down, and you need to move this cable over a little bit so you can still, when you grab this, it still hits the rim right away and it stops you. Like, I just moved here and I was looking for something interesting and volunteer type to do. And this was like in the first newsletter that I saw, and I thought, wow, that sounds really awesome. It's just fun to get to tinker with this stuff. I don't get to do this day to day, so.
Yeah, this is such a great initiative. Like, people just throw away stuff that's broken.
It's very empowering. It gives people a sense that they can actually take control of those objects in their lives and hold on to them and understand them and get inside them, and it gives things more meaning.
A planetarium. It's a small, it'll project stars onto the ceiling. It wasn't rotating, and now there's nothing wrong with it.
The gear slipped out. It required taking apart to the total innards.
When you feel like you understand what a motherboard is inside your computer, when you can take apart your toaster, when you can learn how to fix your tire on your bicycle, these are things that give you a sense of some control and a sense of accomplishment. And it's not just about bringing your item in and giving it over to somebody to fix while you just go away somewhere. This is about you learning how to fix things around you, and that can be a metaphor for fixing things in your life. I love to kind of just sit and hang out and soak up the vibe here. I often say to people, this may sound a little bit corny, but what you see when you walk in here is humanity at its best.
We're going to be in hiding forever with love.
My beloved coffee maker
Oh, your morning friend?
won't start. Well, when I plug it in and turn it on, nothing happens.
Okay. All right, so
Nothing whatsoever.
So
A repair cafe is a place where neighbors help neighbors learn how to repair. They can sit with a fixer, have a cup of coffee, have some pastry, and learn and watch how something is actually fixed.
It's like surgery.
it is.
What happens is, as a person rides, the brake pads wear down, and you need to move this cable over a little bit so you can still, when you grab this, it still hits the rim right away and it stops you. Like, I just moved here and I was looking for something interesting and volunteer type to do. And this was like in the first newsletter that I saw, and I thought, wow, that sounds really awesome. It's just fun to get to tinker with this stuff. I don't get to do this day to day, so.
Yeah, this is such a great initiative. Like, people just throw away stuff that's broken.
It's very empowering. It gives people a sense that they can actually take control of those objects in their lives and hold on to them and understand them and get inside them, and it gives things more meaning.
A planetarium. It's a small, it'll project stars onto the ceiling. It wasn't rotating, and now there's nothing wrong with it.
The gear slipped out. It required taking apart to the total innards.
Give us
When you feel like you understand what a motherboard is inside your computer, when you can take apart your toaster, when you can learn how to fix your tire on your bicycle, these are things that give you a sense of some control and a sense of accomplishment. And it's not just about bringing your item in and giving it over to somebody to fix while you just go away somewhere. This is about you learning how to fix things around you, and that can be a metaphor for fixing things in your life. I love to kind of just sit and hang out and soak up the vibe here. I often say to people, this may sound a little bit corny, but what you see when you walk in here is humanity at its best.
We're going to be in hiding forever. With love.
My microphone was not. There's too many things. Okay. Lydia, did you see and hear that video clearly that I just pushed out on Repair Cafe?
I did.
Great. Okay, good. Sorry about that. I'm working on getting an assistant to help technically. Just too much. People have told me that the content of what I teach is getting sacrificed because my mind is on the tech so much. So I'm a one-man band in here, and I'm happy to do that. But it's getting to the point where it's affecting my teaching in terms of the content because I'm managing all the tech, so I need help. And there's a perfect example. At least I knew what to do, but my microphone was muted. So that's good. So we're set, okay? And we can really get going. And we've got our recording, we've got everything, and I'll try to keep things relatively simple on the dashboard. What's really important today is the map of the world. And so without any more testing or anything, I think we can actually get going. And welcome everybody. It's great to see you. That you come in, you sit right on the couches, and we can have increasingly what I think is a very dynamic class, which is all interaction. But today I have to teach some critical content, and I've fallen way behind. And so I'm going to be doing quite a bit of lecturing, but there's something else I need to explain as well. I've noticed in the reflections, even when it's for marks, generally speaking, people are not watching the recorded lectures. Okay? So what they're doing, and I understand this, okay? What people are doing is they're watching the recorded classes. And that's fine, but what they're not doing is making the connection that in order to understand the class, you have to watch the content in the recorded lectures. And even when it's for marks, people still aren't doing it. So I got to thinking this week. I did quite a bit of thinking about what Lydia said last week in terms of notes for the classes, what Maite has said and others. And I realized that it all has to happen in the class. Remember that this class, Short History of the World, has 114 students enrolled in it. 114 students. Right now in the live class, we have this, and we have the online synchronous, which is maybe 3 or 4. So virtually everybody in this class are watching the recordings. And so I have to have a plan for that to make sure that they're getting the critical content. I think I can do it. Okay, so today it's going to be a little bit different, but it's still going to be very interactive. Everything is going to be pretty well the same, except that I've noticed as well in the reflections that because most of the students are watching the recordings only, which is just a discussion class, the reflections are not really dealing with the critical content that much. It's dealing with what we discussed in class, which is critical, but it's not as critical as what's in the recorded lectures. That's the story. And so I have to make sure that today I cover the critical content and the discussion class and have the reviewing and everything. So I have a plan. I think I can do it, but it does mean that I'm going to have to give you a lecture, but I've simplified the lecture a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to post the recorded lectures in the folders. I didn't do that this week. There was nothing there for you for a reason, because I wanted to explain all of this. But I'm going to make sure that the lectures are there as kind of extra. For the students who are really motivated, if they want to watch the lectures and get more content, they can, and that will guarantee they do extremely well in this course. And there are motivated students in this class who will do that. But for now, because of what I'm seeing so far this semester, I'm going to be marking the students on what happens here and what they hear and watch in the recordings of this class. Okay, and that way, the students who are all watching the recordings will be expected only to be watching this 90-minute class in its entirety every week in order to get everything they need. But for the others who want more, I will put the recorded lectures in there, and I will continue to work on getting some transcripts and notes for that. But I think it's the only way I can juggle this, right? In some ways, we're a victim of our own success in this class because there's so many students enrolled and we're creating this sort of flexible class. But at the same time, I have to stay on top of the problems that it's creating and continue to invent this classroom with your help. I can't tell you how much it means to me to see you here. Having the in-person group is critical for this, because for our classes to continue to work, this interaction that we have, the way this is designed, so that, you know, we can pass the mic around and go around like it's a sort of indigenous circle discussion, is really, really important. But I just have to slip in now the content in a way that's simplified, but it's there, okay? So that's the big thing I need to say to everybody at the start of today's class. Just make sure does anybody want to speak to this before we do a little review? If you feel that there's something here that doesn't make sense, I will always go to the in-person group first. Okay, yeah, you good? Great. Okay, well then let's see. And online, if you want to jump in, please jump on your microphone, or in a moment, we will have a student monitoring the live chat. So the second thing we need to do today to make this class work is, right from the start, I need to get the student who's going to be on the notes. And my plan today was to have Lydia on the notes because she had talked about, but she didn't show up. So the person who goes and does the notes, and this is going to be even more important now, those notes, will be monitoring the live chat at the same time. And I put the live chat in the screen to the left, and it's been working well in another class that I do. A student was on the notes and they were monitoring, and it was great. So number one is I'm going to get that student onto that smart board, and it can't be Maite, because Maite is going to come up on the high chair. Okay, because I'm going to be leaning on Maite a little bit right now, and she will be able to handle it. I know she can. So here we go. The person who's going to go over there beside the smartboard and take notes, is it Giorgio? Oh, Ben. Okay, Ben has to be a person who likes to write, or at least understands the importance, because when we talk about civilization today, I'm going to be talking quite a bit about the history of writing as I go through some of the critical developments and turning points. So writing is going to be a big part of today's class, and the written word. So I'm going to pick somebody, and if you feel uncomfortable doing it, then let me know. But I'll just go with Ryan, okay? Yeah, okay, then you can, it's all right. What's your name? Krish? Chris or Krish? Krish. Krish? Yeah, great. Okay, so do you know what to do, or do you want me to show you? Okay, yeah. So you don't need to switch the slide yet. I'll direct you to get you going in a moment, but just make sure, and you see the live chat to your left. You see the black, yeah, that's the live video conference. We don't have to worry about the live chat on YouTube at all. That's just really for recordings, to get the high definition recordings. So good. So for Lydia and for the others, I would suggest that if you really want to participate in the live class, just put it in the live chat as students normally do, and it will be noticed by Krish, and then we will take it up. I've noticed as well in this class and other classes that most of the online synchronous students don't use their microphones. So essentially, what I'm seeing now and how this works is the online synchronous students, what they want is they don't want to share their video and they don't want to share their audio, but they want to participate in the class like they're watching a television show or they're, following a radio show. Great, okay? So now we have a way for you to go to the live chat, and I don't have to keep watching it, and I don't have to worry about Lydia and all the others now. Krish can take care of that. Yes. Well, there's online synchronous, which is they're live, and then there's online asynchronous, which is the recording. Yeah, yeah. Oh, here you go. Yeah. Go ahead.
Like this sort of streaming.
Yes.
Like this is the way that communication has taken nowadays. Like if you see the boom of all these apps like Twitch and all these streaming apps.
Sure.
This is the way communication is developing right now, because it's a way in which we don't have to like expose ourselves, like
Sure. Yeah.
our persona, but we can interact
Yeah.
with another group like us, for instance. So
And it makes and I understand and I makes sense. Also, I'm like all of you sick of Zoom calls. The pandemic, killed everybody with that. So we don't need to be showing our faces. It's ridiculous after a while to have a Zoom call and you've got a bunch of faces sitting static. It causes tension. People don't want to be sitting still in front of a camera all day. It drives people nuts. And I completely get that. So it's not just students and young people who don't want to do it. Older people don't want to do it anymore. They don't want to be sitting in front of their camera, expected to show their face, and their face is dead anyways because nobody shows any expression. So we're getting rid of that. I mean, I'm giving people the option. If they want it, sometimes I'll say, let's see your face now so we can engage with you. But otherwise, fair enough. You're there. We know you're there. Okay. What's critical is when we're going faces, and let's do it in person. Otherwise, it's all right. They're there. Understood. Yeah. So I'm just trying to adapt to this and develop a new classroom for humanity that's going to work. So okay, what's your name again? David. Okay, thanks, David. And where are you from? I'm going to say South America, Central America. South. Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't we jump right into it for a moment? Is it David Rodriguez? Lambana. You wrote that good reflection. As a matter of fact, okay, we're gonna start with a little geography, and it was gonna start with Maite and her reflection, but I'm gonna jump into it, everybody, okay? And we'll bring in the lecture in a moment, okay? But we're in a kind of a review section right now. This is a good student. You know what he did? He wrote to me and he said, I heard what you said about giving zeros out if you sense that AI has written this. In other words, has this reflection been written by a human or a non-human? And he wrote to me and he said, listen, I haven't received a mark. I probably didn't put a zero there yet, David, but there was no mark. And he said, I can write. I've won an award or two in, where I come from, and I'm not an international student who has trouble with English. You have to understand something. Virtually all institutions of post-secondary institutions in Canada today are relying increasingly on international students to drive their revenue. So for David being here and for the two students from India who are here, and you see a lot of them here, we need their revenue. Otherwise, we couldn't survive because the government doesn't give us enough money. For faculty, it's created an immense pressure. Most of my international students have trouble with writing, with English, and I'm constantly sending them to tutors. And I'm happy to do that and help them. So I made this assumption with David. I thought, international student, this seems very well written. I don't think he wrote it, but I want to talk to him. Sure enough, he wrote me this wonderful email, and he said, no. And I didn't know you were going to show up today, and I appreciate you coming to class. He took the initiative, and I can see now that he knows how to write, and I think he knows how to think, too. I get that sense. Hold it to your mouth, okay? Just so everybody can hear you, like karaoke.
like I haven't been showing up because, for instance, last class I had an exam. So you know, they usually program exams. Like for instance, if we have like an online class, they take Fridays for that. So as this is like an elective class, I need to take those exams. Like I have no other way
No
around.
problem. You have lots of options in this class.
So yeah,
You
but
know?
no, that's why. Like I think it's an interesting class. I would be showing up a little bit more if I didn't have more exams and stuff to do.
Well, thank you. Okay. And all right, before we do our official review, let's figure out where David is from. So, why don't you tell us? I could probably guess if it's South America. There are many countries in South America. It's definitely not Mexico because that's Central America. It's definitely not Guatemala. Central. It is, but if we want to break it down and go into north, central, but she's right. North and south is how we often say it. It's true, but we often say central too. But well, okay. Okay, I'll let her. I'll let her. That's true. But okay, so just fair enough. But so David, just a second. We'll say right now it's North America and South America. Those are the two great continents of the Western Hemisphere. But sometimes we say North, Central, and South in this part of the world. But for now, we'll go North and South, okay? But we do. Yeah. Well, we have options. We're not going to say one or the other. We're going to say both. Go ahead.
If we don't clear this kind of descriptions, we continue we perpetuate, that's how do you say it?
Perpetuate.
Okay, we perpetuate bad ideas.
Okay, for the moment,
Wrong
I'm
ideas.
to say that both Maite and I are correct for now. But Maite has a point. Let's move on.
Maite is right.
Fair enough, but we'll get into it here too. But David, can you describe, holding the microphone to your mouth, where you come from in South America? Just point, or tell us by looking at the map of the world, because that's up here for a very important reason today. It's going to allow me to be very fast in taking you from the beginnings of civilization to the conquest. And the conquest is one of the great turning points in human history. It's when the Eastern Hemisphere, which is Europe, Asia, Africa, everything sort of east of the Atlantic Ocean, figured out that there's this other place called the Americas, and that's the Western Hemisphere. And it's when these two hemispheres came together, and that was Christopher Columbus and all the Spanish conquistadors and others from England and Portugal and elsewhere. We're gonna end there today. I've got to get you to that point. So I'm going to be moving from the beginnings of civilization all the way up to 1492 today. And that's the only way I can do that fast is by just having the map in front of you so you can watch how the empires are rising and falling, coming and going. So let's first remember that we are privileged to have in our class two smart people from South America, Maite and David. So David, where do you come from in South America?
I've never hidden that. Like, I think some people might remember from the presentations of the first day.
Yes.
So I'm just from Colombia, like Colombia.
Okay. Well, that's good because that allows me to at least have a starting point for the lecture today, because I'm going to start the lecture in a moment after the review at the equator. And it turns out that the equator, which is the latitude, we're going to be talking a lot about the map today, okay? So let's orient ourselves to the map for the moment, okay? Just very briefly, and then we're going to do our official review. Do you want to and we're going to start writing this stuff down. When we look at the entirety of human civilization, we have to flatten it out on a map. That's what we do. But the planet is not flat. It's round. Now, it's a sphere. You might think, Lon, that's obvious. In another class this week, take the notes as you think they're important, okay? Write down what you think is important, okay? I'll let you figure that out, and we'll tell you some more as well, okay? So you just go ahead and you write down. In another class this week, a student said, the earth is flat. He didn't mean it, but he said, online today, I see repeated over and over and over again a lot of people who say the earth is flat. And we had a very good discussion. This was in my global leader class, where the student began to understand that there's this thing called pseudoscience and science, fake science and real science. In the online world today, a lot of things get repeated over and over and over again. And it is the heart of propaganda. It's called propaganda theory. The Nazis in the Second World War, fascists understand this. If you repeat something over and over and over again, even if it's a lie, people start to believe it's true. Yeah, sure, Ryan. We had a great discussion about this, and the student was brave in saying, listen, I know that it's a sphere, but I keep seeing all these things online, and I'm starting to wonder. Anyways, we're not going to have that discussion now. But my point is that we know that this is round, and here, you can take that. But we flatten it out, and that map is going to be so critical to us today. And what will be critical is when we look at latitudes and we look at longitudes. Okay, so latitudes are the lines that go from east to west in the world. And that divides the world into the north and the south, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And it turns out that the equatorial latitude, that is the center, runs right through Colombia, or pretty well, doesn't it? South. Okay, so I'm not going to, for the sake of making sure it's interactive and I don't get too hung up on the tech, I'm going to stay here and I'm not going to be putting my cursor over things because it's too much for me to do. We will talk about the map like this, and you will have to orient yourself to it. And we will say things like, well, the equator, it goes through Colombia and just north of Ecuador, and it runs through Africa, and I think it's, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and it goes all the way, to the Pacific Ocean in the east. Do you see that equatorial line in the map? Okay, good. Yes, but it's too complicated, Maite. I've got too many things to think about. The critical thing is I want to engage. And what's happening is I'm doing too many technical things and the content is suffering. Okay? Do you understand? Okay, good. So I would love to have students, helping, but I mean, I don't want to put pressure on students and, say, can you volunteer? So right now, just be aware that today we're going to be talking a lot about that map, and we often split it into, there is the equatorial latitude that goes straight to the center of the planet that divides into north and south hemispheres, and then there's the longitudinal lines that go from north to south, and that divides the world into eastern and western hemispheres. So the hemispheres, Krish, are really important today. Northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, eastern hemisphere, western hemisphere. Okay, and we're thinking, when we talk about civilization and how civilization has evolved, we're thinking like astronauts. We're looking back on the planet. Think of it as we're in the International Space Station now. We're having the very 21st century view. We're looking back and we're thinking the whole planet, the human story on planet Earth. And to do that, we start with, okay, we have hemispheres. We have hemispheres, okay? That's enough for now. The next thing I want to do before we really get into this is I want to stick to our plan and have a review. So I respectfully ask Maite to come up here and read out loud her first or second reflection that you wrote. Sure, you can bring it up. Actually, you know what? Just read it from there. Yeah, that's good. You've got it there. And then later we'll bring a student up here and we'll go from there. But I'm just for the sake of, again, making sure that I'm staying focused with you, I'm not going to rush back to the podium and put her reflection from DC Connect up there. It's not necessary. If you want to read it, you know it's there, okay? So do you want to, well, while she's doing that, let me see if I can quickly do this. Are you okay? Yeah, okay. So, Krish, as she's reading this, think of anything that's happening right now in terms of the interaction that we're doing as live and important knowledge. And if you think it's important, put it down. There's a reason why I'm doing this. Students need to be able to take notes. You see, you're all used to PowerPoints. You're all used to being given things. It's not necessarily spoon feeding. I wouldn't use a word that strong, but there's an element of that. That you are given PowerPoints, the professors give all the stuff, and you just memorize that stuff, and you just move on, and you've never actually learned how to write down notes properly. And this is called lazy thinking. We need to be better thinkers. The world is extremely complex now. It's volatile, and we have 2 wars going on right now that could develop into regional wars and global wars. I don't need to tell you about those. I'm trying to help you all, not just understand history, but to be deeper and smarter thinkers for a very, very difficult world. So being able to listen and then write down what's happening, being able to select on your own what you think is important is a critical skill. So for me to keep telling you what to write down, or for me to give you a PowerPoint and say this is important, what I'm doing, in a way, this is strong. But Maite said it well last week. I'm making your mind irrelevant. I'm making you more stupid. I'm making you children who just wait to be given things. This is a grown-up world we're in. We need a lot more tough, critical, smart, rational, compassionate people. And you need to be able to take notes and understand what's going on. And you need to process it in your head. So, Krish, it may not be perfect. Please don't feel that pressure. But as you write down things, you're doing something that's really important. You're engaging with the material and thinking for yourself. Okay? So whatever you think is important, we'll review it later. Okay, so Maite is going to read, and then Ryan, maybe we'll get yours, and then we'll move on. So Maite, make sure you hold the microphone. This is Maite's second reflection, and it was well written. It had a good critical mind going. Maite, please go ahead.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The development of AI is making people feel excited about it. But I think they are excited because of their ignorance. Getting to the point where humans become irrelevant in any aspect of daily life and machines take over even more of what they already do is a disastrous idea. It will become a second industrial revolution with the corresponding consequences of precariousness for most of the population. This class needs to know how entire villages were displaced without any regard. Men, women, and children living and working in the most absolute state of precariousness, violence, abuse, illness, and dying in abandonment because of it.
Hold it just a little lower, okay? Because sometimes, yeah.
Let me finish the paragraph.
So they hear.
Okay, laborers had to work in slavery conditions. This class must study what historically happened around technological revolutions and be aware of the possible future for humankind. I think it's irresponsible to jump ahead without considering the cost of human lives, because there's not going to be another planet to go, no matter how much Elon Musk is financing NASA or whichever private company wants to build rockets. If machines takes over, a humanitarian crisis will arise so much faster with its corresponding violence. We have lived this before with liberalism. And analyzing this topic should be a must. Human dignity and life quality are more important and should come first. Talking about AI as the next step for our evolution as a society, if it were going to be a panacea, is at least a biased position. And I don't want to have this discussion without providing historical context. We also talk a little bit about civilizations and how it was due to agriculture that early societies started to conform. Human settlements have always occurred near water sources because there's no way farming can exist without water. Hence, people wouldn't have been able to fulfill their basic needs. Human beings can move forward and start breathing, planning, building, dreaming, questioning, and creating only because they have already eaten. We should have reviewed the most important ancient cultures, their unique characteristic, their relationship with each other, and the legacy they left that we continue to use these days.
Thank you, Maite. That's great. Take this, come up in a moment, okay? Yeah, okay, all right. There are two or three things that Maite said that are really important, and I want to make sure they get into the notes. And then we're going to hear from Ryan, and then we're really going to talk about the origins of civilization and how it evolved and reached the point where in 1492 we saw two halves of the planet come together, and there was a terrible genocide. So we're going to have to understand something about how we got to 1492, and then how we get from 1492 to the 21st century, when, in spite of all that we thought we learned about human dignity and the need to be more free, look at where we are right now in this world today, with a war that has broken out in the Holy Land. So I'm going to be introducing you to a few big ideas today about how this has happened, and we'll go through chronologically what happened. But first, as Maite read her reflection, and as she read it herself, did you feel a little bit of outrage? Would you say a little bit of a sense that injustice? There's a very important word, injustice. Injustice. She also mentioned something about this idea of liberalism. Liberalism. You see, as Alfred North Whitehead told us, he's a very important world historian as well of the 20th century, philosopher and a mathematician, and wrote a book called The Adventures of Ideas. He said that human civilization is about the battle for ideas. The battle for ideas. So it's important for us to just think about this idea of injustice. In fact, I might even add one more word before we listen to Ryan, and we're still just reviewing at this point. Okay, it's called hierarchy. Hierarchy. We did not have a thing called hierarchy and slavery until there was a thing called civilization. Do you know that among the foragers and hunter-gatherers and the tribal cultures in the world that extend much further back than this thing called civilization that is largely a European creation, there really is no thing called slavery or hierarchy in any of these great indigenous cultures. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Iroquois, the great Iroquois culture, First Nation, they have a thing called the Iroquois Confederacy. And when the architects of the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution were looking for examples of democratic thinking, they didn't just look to Greece, they also looked to the Iroquois. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want you to know that Maite and others and all of you have started to sort of sense this, and I will always tell you about this in greater detail, including with the scholars that I will bring to the class. I'm afraid that slavery and injustice and hierarchy, which I will explain shortly, is essentially a development of civilization. It's not natural. That's a big idea. The other thing that you're going to hear about today when we talk about civilization is that this idea of God, a single God, monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is a human invention. Now, last night when I was at the gym, just thinking about the class, and I was on the step machine, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? There was a woman who walked by me, and her t-shirt said, "Yes, there is only one truth." Of course, I wanted to give her an earful, but I respect people's beliefs. What I do not respect is when people start to look at history and they think that this idea of a single God, in fact, their own faith, is all there is. That's the truth. When you start to see the bigger story on this planet, that's why I've opened up this story for all of you to look at the planet. You start to see so much has been going on planet Earth for a long time. It's very diverse. And if we don't respect that diversity, we're doomed. Okay, so I really, really want to teach today. I don't just want to do tech. So you may feel a difference, but this is me, really, as a teacher, not me divided with tech. So let's hear from Ryan, okay? Ryan, do you want me to take it from DC Connect and you read it from there? I think I can do it. And then we'll move on. Is there anything anybody would like to say before I do this about what Maite read in terms of her thoughts? Please put it in the live chat or pass the microphone around. I'm going to now go to DC Connect.
I do want to say something.
Okay. Do you want to? Why don't you come up?
No, I would like him to return to the first slide.
Go ahead.
The first one, no, the previous one. And where it says propaganda is very influential, brackets, or like saying that Mexico is South America, people, if you keep repeating that, people still believe that. And last class, Lydia told us about a friend of her, a classmate of her, had to use AI to understand an assignment because the classmate couldn't understand the professor. And I wonder, why to use AI? The professor has the duty to explain himself to the student in any way possible for the student to understand him. He needs to show him previous, perhaps, assignments. This is what I want, and this is the way you do it.
There's David.
Okay? You don't need to go and ask a computer or a robot for instructions. They lack of the human factor. If that teacher, a professor, is not able to explain himself, that person needs another professor.
Great. Okay, so you can read it from, you know what? You stand here, okay? And I'll sit here. We're going to make this work. And anytime you have something you want to tell Krish, right? It's not just my take, any of you can. This is our collective learning right now. This is real time learning that we can do together, okay? Great. Okay, so Ryan's going to read his, and then we're going to move on, and I'll join everybody here and go for it, Ryan.
Okay. So this is from like reflection 1. So I thought I'd give this a reflection a name that like kind of mirrors my experience and like thus describes my relatability to work so far covered. And I think for the first 3 classes, like it's been very insightful in a number of different areas, like not limited to just religion or particle physics or philosophy. And like it depicts a lot of like great thinkers that have preceded me in this lifetime. Like radical thinkers like Einstein, who dare to dive into the realm like beyond common understanding of man to pursue the power residing in conscious thought, to do things like construct great theories that elegantly depict nature of the universe in simple but maybe not so simple terms summarized like E equals mc squared. The ability to take your conscious thought to a realm beyond space and time and devise a mathematical equation that unifies the relationship between matter and energy is one of the great accomplishments of Albert Einstein's beyond the box thinking. However, what I term as just as interesting is the knowledge of the past acquired from various different religions, explaining the same principle that later became illustrated by Einstein's theory. So we previously touched on the 4 fundamental forces of the universe that are binding the nature of all things in existence, once again depicting the connection between matter and energy, which is perfectly shown through the gravitational force alone. Religion often talks about the existence of ourselves in the form that exists beyond the material world, so in an energetic form, like Einstein talks about. This concept alone is often not something I find that is expressed through the following basic guidelines of one single religion, because the truth cannot be taught or meddled with. It must be realized in a form relative to the individual. So that means like everybody's truth or what they believe to be the truth is relative to them, and that's what makes it like have value. So where was I?
The thing I've learned from the study, go on. Yep.
The thing I've learned from the study of various religions, both from my own knowledge and material that has recently prompted me from class, is that one must have an open mind, free from all limitations, resistance, and binding, to realize that that is or has ever will be, and as ever will be, and therefore not only gain a deeper understanding of the outside environment, but an understanding of oneself. The realization that our external circumstances that have transpired through our existence is not just something that has happened, but is a reflection of us in the present. And what makes those versions more or less relevant and reflective is our default perspective as the observer of all of it.
Excellent. Okay. Let's talk about this.
I
Okay.
know that was very complex. It might be a lot to digest.
Go grab it, take a seat, and we'll talk a little bit about this and about my taste, and then we'll move on. Do you mind sitting up here? That way the students can see your face. Okay. Same with you, Maite? Yeah. That way everyone can see your face. I noticed this is good. And bring the microphone, okay? And because there should be trying to you've got the mic, okay? And then we'll get to the critical content in a moment. The most important thing about what we're doing right now is we're talking about and exploring how you're processing. You want to stand? You stand. Okay, whatever. Come on, yeah, whatever you need. Okay, okay, take the stool. So you may think that the critical part of the class is what I have to tell you. That's important. But ultimately, it's about what you're thinking and how you're processing things and the way that you're learning, because your mind needs to be also developing. There's a mindset in this class that I'm helping you to develop. So hearing what Maite has to say and Ryan has to say is really critical because they're you. This is a student-centered class. Okay, so first, is there anything anybody would like to say about what Ryan has written? Any thoughts on, do you think he's onto something about a free mind?
I think that
Sure.
his skill, sorry,
Yep, go ahead.
I think his skill to keep an open mind, I think that's something that's really admirable, but it's also something that not a lot of people have, that it has to be learned in a lot of ways. I think some people are born with it, some people aren't, but it can be learned like anything else. And I think a huge chunk of this class is going to be us learning that skill.
And by the way, me introducing you to individuals in the human story that give us hope. They are the free thinkers, the ones who were brave and saw something more and either dealt with injustice and introduced a new idea that was one of peace and compassion, or maybe a scientific mindset, somebody who's exploring the natural world and trying to tell us what's really happening as opposed to what the religions are telling us. Maybe it's a warrior, a general who acted bravely and courageously in a moment when his life or her life was threatened. Contrary to what Maite says, there are humans in our story that I think give us great hope for our future. Now, I'm not going to say anything more. I simply want to say thank you, Maite, for allowing yourself to be criticized, because you are smart, you're tough, and you know that I mean this in the most respectful way, and I know, and you know that I will listen to her. But she has a dark view of humanity. And I think that it's important to hear, but I don't think it's the whole story. Now, just a second. Ryan comes. Would you say that Ryan, in spite of the roughness of his writing right now, it's just a first draft, you know, if we were correcting for spelling, it would be a disaster, but it's just an early draft, okay? But you get a sense that Ryan has a kind of sense of hope for humanity in this? Something's going on. I'm curious. Anybody have a thought on this? Think about what he's writing. He's talking about Einstein. He's talking about an open mind. He's talking about particle physics. Do you think it's a closed mind that can understand and explain particle physics? A frightened mind? No, it's a brave mind that is thinking, whoa, there's something going on in the natural world, these atoms and subatomic particles. Yes. Go ahead. What's your name?
Chantal.
You're Chantal.
Yeah.
Ah, Chantal Gallant.
Yes.
Nice to see you in the class. Great. Go ahead, Chantal.
I think that the difference is an emotional attachment, personally.
An emotional attachment.
Yeah, I think if you, with a lot of things, if you take the emotion out and you're able to just observe with an open mind, then you can process things differently, on maybe a more broader spectrum.
Sure.
And look at it from a bigger picture. But when you have, and especially obviously experiences in your own filter, until you fully detach from that and have that space.
That's space.
Yeah.
My take? Do you want before we're just reviewing? I'm going to start the content in a moment, but do you want to respond to that at all?
Well, I have some point of views and different points, I mean. Okay, you mentioned that I have a
darker view of the
Okay.
human story or the
Oh, yeah, you just need to read history. You see it there. Okay, it's dark. It's dark. I'm not thinking everything is bad. Of course, there are good things, and I don't think humankind can be bad per se, but they can do really they can damage really bad. Okay, but on the other hand, we have kindness. We have people that help each other. Okay, yes. But I will attribute that to religion. Oh no, religion has its own purpose. It has separated, denigrated, killed in the name of a God, whichever God it is. The Abrahamic religions are terrible, terrible. You just need to read it. There is something out there in the universe, forces or whatever. I don't know. Perhaps. Okay. Energy doesn't finish. It only becomes something else. So I don't know. But Einstein, well, half of his work was made by his wife. So yeah, so
women.
Okay, she was not just acknowledged because she was a woman at that age, at that time. So women were like silent. Okay, so
half of the human race is something that has its roots, the beginnings of civilization, and I'm about to tell you about that. And it is something that has been changed, but we need to be vigilant about it. But there is a historian today, his name is Theodore Zeldin, An Intimate History of Humanity. Wonderful book, by the way. I could bring it in sometime. And he has said there is an irreversible change that has happened because of modern events in the last 300 years or so that seems to be irreversible. I say seem, I shouldn't say is, seems. That is the rights that women have won to reclaim the place that they should have in history that they lost when they were sidelined at the beginning of civilization to pump out children to work the farms. You'll see how this happened. These farms never became so productive without children and women doing the hard labor on the farms. They did not have time to participate in the other events, the wars and things that became the stuff of history. But the women were there. It's just that the winners of the wars were the men. And they told the story. So one of the great injustices that we're going to see confronted and changed, hopefully permanently, is that women and men are now side by side, not men up here, women here. Now, if you are Margaret Atwood, great Canadian novelist who wrote the story The Handmaid's Tale that became the big Netflix series, she might have a view that's more like my take, which is we're going backwards. We're slipping and sliding right now, and women are losing their rights again. And
well,
but let's stop. Okay, my take. I just want to make sure we stay on track. Okay, I've got to get the content. Is there anything that you'd like to say about what Ryan has written in terms of the more sort of open, free, positive view of the human being as the explorer, discoverer of things. Does it make sense that we have a bit of a paradox or contradiction or a question we have to? Is our story a dark one in civilization? Is it a brighter one, or are we somewhere in between? And where might we be
Fluctuates.
going? So we're going to start in a moment to go back and try to answer that question. Okay? Go ahead.
It fluctuates. Okay. I don't know if you have read this before. Perhaps you have done it. It says, hard times build strong men. Strong men build good times. Good times build weak men. Weak men build hard times. And then we have the cycle again. And that has happened all over history. And guess where we are? And another thing about religion is contingent. And I mean that it belongs to a specific place and in a specific time. I mean, Egypt gods were over 5,000 years before Abrahamic religions, Abrahamic religions, and they are not here anymore. And also Zeus and Apollos and all the Greek gods, and the Aztec gods and all the gods, and they are raised. So it's just a matter of time. And the gods that we believe, well, not me, but the gods that people believe, or the God that people believe that is like not the God, it's just in your mind, because how come that God had never appeared to, I don't know, some indigenous person in the middle of the Amazon? Well, it's just in your mind.
We'll stop for a second, but for any of you who are religious, very religious here, and that is online, synchronously or asynchronously, please think about what Maite is saying, and if you can, challenge her and challenge us. Asynchronously, you can do that in your reflections, you can do this now online, or you can do it here, but for those of you who are believers, deep believers in one God, we must respect that, in spite of what Maite says, which is, there's a lot of truth there. But okay, Ryan, is there anything you want to say before I really get going on the content? I'm going to bring the map back, and anything you want to add?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to respond to what Chantel was saying about like kind of being detached. And I think like there is something that's maybe a similar element to that, but I would say it's more of connection instead of detachment, because when you're so in tuned, like it's almost like but you're able to stay in a balance of neutrality, then it's like you're more tuned in, not less. So you're emotionally connected, but it's like you're not to one side or the other. You're trying to see things like, as you said, objectively as possible, but it's you're there, you know? You're not detached, you're not enthusiastic. You are emotionally invested.
Yes,
but you're
yes.
just not allowing yourself to be swayed to one side or the other, because I think we live in a reality that is completely based off the idea of dualism, where we think of everything as in relation hot and cold, up, down, north, south, you know, whatever. And that's the only thing way we can normally explain things in our mind, that it's in some kind of a balance, right?
Right.
But you know, that's not maybe always necessarily the truth of, you know, in the universal picture, you know, because you know, maybe we are just like, you know, limiting our own thinking by trying to see things one way, but sometimes it's not about thinking, sometimes it's just about how things are, you know.
Well, maybe what you're trying to put your finger on in some ways is what Jacob Bronowski, another historian and great free thinker of the 20th century, said about how knowledge is our destiny for humans. He also said that there's a new mind coming, the coming of the new mind. Humans need a new way of thinking about their place on the planet and the universe. Are we ready for that new mind, or will we default back to the same old stuff, the same old? What's that, Chantel?
We started to kind of see that, and then it's like, are we defaulting back? Like,
Yeah. The new mind, something. We can't go back. Exactly. We can't go back to the way it was. Okay. So
I have something to say before we move on.
Let's move on, and you're welcome to stay here as well. It's great to see Maite sitting cross-legged here. That can be your spot for the class, okay? And please stay here while we. Now I'm going to embark on something a little bit new. Is that I'm going to try and deliver a lecture about about 7,000 years fairly quickly. But I want to give you some critical content, and I want to do it based on the map. Okay, so let me just put this in front of you. And I know that online, Lydia and others, you can see the world map clearly, right? Lydia?
I had something to say before we moved on. I'll keep it short.
Clearly?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had something to say before you moved on. It's really short. But what?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The man in the leather jacket beside you. What's his name?
Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Ryan. The impression I got from what you were trying to describe of being connected to everything around you so that you can stay neutral. From my interpretation, is that you have to care about every side, or in this case, every person or every group. Because if you don't care, then there's a bias there. If you care about one more than the other. So in an effort to be open, you have to care about everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, just hold it there.
That's what I was trying to come around to and speak about with the detachment too. I didn't mean it in maybe the way it came out, but because of it, I mean, to hurt you is to hurt me is my kind of mentality, right? So if you detach from all the different minds or what's being said and take, because the biggest thing that goes on is you attach to something that you believe or hear, and the emotion drives you into these actions that are. But if you can, detach long enough to pull out and have more of an open mind, and then that other connection kind of filters in on its own. I'm not very articulate.
It's okay. We in Short History of the World, as we tell the story.
Thrown something.
We'll come to that. We're ultimately exploring what a student once said several years ago to me about this story. We're trying to figure out what it means to be human. What exactly is the human story? And it's never been more relevant, Chantal, than today, because we're creating machines that are starting to replace us. So what is the special thing that humans bring to the table? Bring to this thing on the planet that a machine can't? So that's what. Always give yourself the space to explore in this class, because that's ultimately what we're doing when we tell this story, is we're trying to understand through our history what we've done and what we haven't done. What are we, humans? Because it's very relevant now in the 21st century to make sure we understand, so we don't make ourselves irrelevant with our machines. Does that make sense? It's great. So no apologies. Ryan, I just want to stop you only because I want to make sure I give you this content. And I'm looking at, it's already 1:15, and so let me move pretty fast here, okay? Some critical things that need to be said. And I'm going to assume with the online students that you can see the map very clearly behind me. I'm not going to try and share it so you have it full screen, because then it'll be technically a problem for me right now. Okay, so if you find that the map is not that clear for you, for the also asynchronous students, then check the DC Connect folder and the map will be there for you that you can link on. So let's start, okay? I talked about this idea that today we would kind of move from the origins of civilization up until the conquest in 1492, which is when the Eastern Hemisphere essentially slaughtered, more or less, the people of the Western Hemisphere. And the legacy we live with today, with First Nations fighting to get their land back, is a direct result of what happened then. So it's very much a part of our history today. So let's go back, okay? Let's go back to about 5,000 BCE. So essentially 7,000 years ago. Yeah, sure, go ahead, all right? And I'm just going to, for the moment, I'm going to put my cursor, I'm going to land it right here at the origins of so much of what we're about to talk about, and that is go right here to the edge of the Persian Gulf, which then creates the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, that flow into modern Iraq today. And I just want to remind you that civilization began more or less, we started to understand how to exploit the soil and grow things about 10,000 years ago. And I corrected myself last week when Lydia brought up this little discrepancy, and she said, I mentioned 13,000 in one talk and then 10,000, and I explained why I said 10,000. So we're talking about the story of human civilization on this planet begins 10,000 years ago with food production and agriculture. And it has been called by Ronald Wright, a historian who's written a very good book called Short History of Progress, the Great Experiment. So let's understand now, about 5,000 years after that, so essentially 5,000 BC, I won't say BCE, 5,000 BC, we see this situation. This is where we're going to start today. We have what are called the heartlands, which is in essentially Mesopotamia, which is the area that I put my cursor at, that is between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We really saw the beginnings of civilization there more than any other place. Mesopotamia means land between two rivers. Okay, it's Greek for land between two rivers. Mesopotamia, land between two rivers. But these heartlands, as they're called, also happen elsewhere in the world. And I just want to make sure you're clear on where these were before we start to really begin to explore what happened in these places. But you're going to notice something. The heartlands began to grow around the Nile River. And I'm not going to move the cursor now, but Nile River is in Egypt. It's the longest river in the world, okay? It flows into the Mediterranean Sea. It comes south and goes down the eastern part of Africa, but that's where the Egyptian Empire is going to form after the Mesopotamians. When we talk about the first empire in human history, the one that really matters to us right now, it happened in Mesopotamia. It's called ancient Sumer, S-U-M-E-R, ancient Sumer. 5,000 BC, 7,000 years ago, we see this situation in ancient Sumer. We see a whole bunch of city-states of about 30,000 people living along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Babylon, Lagash, Ur, Uruk, a lot of the biblical places. And these city-states formed an empire, a kind of cultural empire, even though they were very much in conflict. And that's called Sumer, ancient Sumer. So it's really important that you understand Sumer is the first human empire that really matters. And it happened in Mesopotamia. Now, there will be other empires that develop as we move from 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, and these empires will be in the Nile River, Egypt. You go east on the map to China today, around the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, and we will see that in China. You go back west a little bit to what is India and Pakistan right now, and there's a river called the Indus River, and we will see the great Indian Empire developing there around the Indus River. And then a little bit later, across the Atlantic Ocean, in the Western Hemisphere, around the Gulf of Mexico, we will see the great Mesoamerican empires forming, as well around the Pacific Rim with ancient Peru. the Inca civilization. So let's establish something here about empire, about where we're seeing the origins of civilization, because all of this is going to start to grow and then interconnect and be in conflict. We see it in Sumer, Tigris and Euphrates. We see it around the Indus River. That will grow into the great Indian civilization. We will see it in China. We will see it across the Atlantic Ocean a little bit later in Mesoamerica or in North America and South America. And for now, I'm going to call it, Mesoamerica. I'm going to call it the Americas. I'm just going to call that the Americas, okay, for the sake of our discussion. So essentially about 5,000 BC, 7,000 years ago, we are seeing humans living along these rivers, engaging in agriculture and food production, and growing. Populations are starting to grow around in these communities. Population will grow dramatically as a result of food production and civilization. This is a huge problem for humanity today. Now, before I move on and explain more about which empires start to grow and become more dominant, and how it is that we will eventually get to the point where about 6,500 years later, from 5,000 BC to 1492, we are going to reach a point where the Eastern Hemisphere, which we call Afro-Eurasia, Africa, Europe, Asia, that's Afro-Eurasia. The center of that is ancient Sumer. How is it that they are then going to come across the Atlantic Ocean and meet the Americas? It's not going to be the Americas that come to the Western Hemisphere, the Eastern Hemisphere. It's the other way around. Why was that? And then why is it that when the Eastern Hemisphere came, Afro-Eurasians, and they met the Western Hemisphere, they basically killed everybody? Why would they do that? Well, I'm going to get to that in a moment because I want to take you to an idea. I want to introduce you to a very powerful idea that comes from one of our most important world historians. His name is William McNeill. I've spoken about him before. He wrote a book called The Rise of the West, A History of the Human Community. This is my copy in the 1960s. It won many awards, and it was the first attempt by a scholar speaking several languages, took him about 30 years to write, where he tried to understand what is the human story. This is a history of the human community. It's one of the most important world histories ever written. As a matter of fact, when he wrote this book, William McNeill, he had so many notes afterwards about infectious disease that he then wrote another book that was considered groundbreaking called Plagues and Peoples, where he looked at the impact of infectious disease on the growth of human societies. So he's a pioneering thinker. His son, John McNeill, is a world historian today, an important one. So these two are very, very important. William McNeill and John McNeill. He died in his 90s. He's no longer with us, William McNeill, but his son is carrying on his legacy. I want to read you something about what William McNeill said about ancient Sumer, the origins of human civilization, and this idea of how we started to create this, we say, hierarchy, H-I-E-R-A-R-C-H-Y. You have to remember that ancient Sumer, right there in the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was a powerhouse before there was religion. We're talking now about 5,000 years before the coming of Jesus, Anno Domini, the birth of Jesus. That's the Christian calendar that we use today. And for want of a more common calendar, we'll stick with that for now because everybody's familiar with it. Religion had not yet come yet to the human story, not among the Indian or Indus peoples, Chinese, the Americas, but the Sumerians were already starting to worship things. As a matter of fact, in the Sumerian city-states, every single city-state had a thing called a ziggurat. Z-I-G-G-U-R-A-T, a ziggurat. This ziggurat was basically the central building in these places where the 30,000 people or 40,000 that lived in each of these city-states would congregate in their sort of marketplace. And this ziggurat was a place of worship. It was also the storehouse for grain and for food. And for any of you who've watched my recorded lecture on the beginning of civilization, you will understand something about the granary, you may remember, okay? It's very important for us to understand something about the origins of religion. See, in 1492, when Christopher Columbus and his 3 dinky little ships from Spain landed the Americas in what is now the Bahamas area, the islands there, he knew that the earth was not flat. He'd already gone to a navigational school in a place called Sagres. It's a great navigational school just on the tip of Spain. And he had learned a lot about navigation, and he was smart. And there were many who understood from science and just by looking at the horizon, the way ships move, that it's sort of round. And if you send a ship across the ocean, the Atlantic, it's probably going to make its way around and land in India eventually. It's going to go around. That's what he was looking for. A sea route to the ancient great civilizations. I will get to that later in the course. My point is that when he arrived in the Bahamas and thought he was in India, that's why they're called the Indians, do you know that he was carrying flags, Spain, Christian flags? In fact, he got his money from Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain, who had a Christian empire in Spain. In fact, the Pope at the time issued a papal edict that said, those people, if you meet any new peoples on your journeys and they do not want to become Christian, they're not human. So religion is a very important force in our story. And just look at the Holy Land right now. You don't think it's relevant, religious conflict? Was anybody alive here during 2001, September the 11th, when 4 planes collided with the World Trade Center and the Pentagon? September the 11th, 2001, 9/11. Religious extremism and fanaticism and the belief in a single God is a powerful force in human history, and we are living with it today, and we will continue to live with it, and we grapple with it. Well, let's go back a little bit, before there was even religion, and try to understand what is it about humans that come to believe and fear God, a single God. I'm not talking about Buddhism, not talking about Hinduism right now, or Zoroastrianism, or any other faith, or even any of the pagan ideas of the great Roman Empire where there was multiple gods. This idea of a single god is very powerful in our story. We're grappling with it. Well, listen to what William McNeill had to say about the Sumerians and how they were starting to worship. Because we start to understand something about fear. William McNeill. As temple communities established themselves in Sumer, those city-states with their ziggurats were temple communities. The ziggurat was the temple to worship the god king, the ruler, Gilgamesh, for example, or Nebuchadnezzar, or any of the other great god kings of the Sumerian city-states. Babylonians had them too. This ziggurat was a place where you came to worship your ruler. Your god king was a man who ruled in these different city-states. As temple communities established themselves in Sumer, it became normal for cultivators to produce a food surplus sufficient to maintain a core of specialists who no longer had to work in the fields. Here's a critical term. Brian, just hold your thought, okay? I just want to make sure I get this behind, but this is a really big idea today. This social differentiation, could you please write that down? This social differentiation. Social differentiation. Which lies at the basis of all civilization, is neither natural nor automatic. In contemporary primitive societies, men rarely care to produce more than they immediately require. Yet in ancient Mesopotamia, tens of thousands of farmers were persuaded to exert themselves to feed others. The implausible irrationality of such behavior arose out of older fears that had impelled men. And when he says men, he means humans. But he was writing in the 1960s, and okay, he means men, women, okay? Mankind, right? We don't say that anymore. We say humankind. This implausible irrationality of such behavior arose out of older fears that had impelled men immemorially to offer a share of their food to the jealous spirits who might otherwise withhold future nourishment from an ever-hungry mankind. Sumerian theology, we don't have our religions yet, so they had their beginnings of theology. Sumerian theology, as later recorded, held that men had been expressly created to free the gods from the necessity of working for a living. Man was thus considered to be a slave of the gods, obliged to serve ceaselessly and assiduously under the pain of the direst punishment, flood or drought, consequent starvation. Such ideas, no doubt, had a long history before they were recorded in writing. Now, please, Krish, would you write this critical term down, slaves of the gods? Did he? Excellent. This idea of social differentiation and slavery, that one group of people is different from the other. One is better than the other, one is more powerful than the other, one is needed more other. begins now in our earliest civilizations. And we call this hierarchy. And if you look at any religion today, there's always a, well, my God, you look at the Hindu faith. Do you know that in Hinduism today, you have the untouchables? Still, you have the sort of Brahmins up here, the priests, go down 4 levels. And then you have, in Hinduism today, there are people in India, millions, who are considered so dirty by their religion that they're not allowed to stand in your shadow. Not supposed to be. Am I correct in analyzing Hinduism a little bit? Is there an idea of Sikhism? So you speak as a Sikh. Are you a Hindu or a Sikh? Hindu, okay. Am I wrong in saying that in Hinduism, this idea of social differentiation, or the idea that, you know, the untouchable is, it still exists?
But not exist in present, because now due to education, everyone not believe in this type of things. Everyone live together, and these things happen in our past, because at that time, due to the low literacy rate, everyone follow one person. If one say that thing is right, everyone follow him, because the literacy rate in India is very low. But now India is developing and literacy rate is increasing, so that's why these things are changing now.
But you're speaking as a Sikh, not a Hindu.
These things are similar.
So, okay, let me give you a personal example. Can I give you? I spent some time in India. I've traveled, and in my early 20s, I spent some time in what's now called, then it was called...
Which cities you visited?
Southern city. It's called Chennai today, and then it was Madras. And I was working there at a hospital briefly, and I noticed that there were some people there that I was expected to hire who would become my sort of cleaners and people who would be, you know, doing things for me. And I don't like that when people do things for me. You know, I have too much respect for human dignity. But these people were all being given to me. And they didn't seem to be valued very much. And I was told, these are sort of the poorer people here, and they'll work for you. They don't mean too much. The untouchables, the dirty people. It may have changed in India, but there's still immense poverty in the rural
It's a
parts of
bitter
India.
truth about India.
What's that?
It's a bitter truth about India.
It's a bitter truth about India. Okay, well, this idea of social differentiation, William McNeill is telling us, is not natural or automatic. You see, a lot of humans believe that there are biologically superior races. And religions will tell you that. And he's telling us, this is a very powerful idea. And that's why I'm stressing it, and I'm way behind, but I'll catch up. But if you don't get this idea, then you're not understanding something at the heart of injustice and corruption and slavery and hatred and cruelty and all of these things that are about to happen in the human story that don't happen to this extent among indigenous cultures who were here long before the so-called civilized cultures were here. They can be rough, too. First Nations, Iroquois, Ojibwe, you name it. Listen, I don't want to glorify any culture, but they don't have hierarchy and social differentiation to the extent that we do. And this is a problem. Okay, Maite, please go ahead.
Okay, it is not natural and, what did you just mention?
Automatic.
Automatic, okay. Yes, religion is not natural or automatic, but fear.
No, it's not religion, it's not natural. It's the differences between
Okay, but
not natural.
I want to go to the source. I want to go to the source. What is natural is fear. Human fear.
That's what he's saying.
Primitive humans that were not aware of anything, they feared nature. They feared their surroundings.
Exactly.
They feared the thunder. They feared the cliffs. They feared that somebody dropped dead, and perhaps it was a heart attack.
Drought, starvation.
Okay, they fear about everything. So that's the human component. They started to ask, why? Why is this happening? What's out there? What provokes, I don't know, darkness or famine?
Yes.
Or an animal attack? Or some other people just come and kill us and take us from our places, or our women, or our children, or whatever, okay? Or flood. So they tried to find answers. And they found.
Maite, the answers would come at the beginning.
At the beginning was the
We
sun.
were afraid we didn't apply critical thinking and say, well, if there's a famine, it's not that we need to pray more to the God of good crops. We don't need to do that. No, we should irrigate. Have better soil.
Perhaps.
Grow more.
Yes.
Critical thinking.
Yes.
That's not fear. That's human.
But the fear is that these crops won't grow, that the river is going to be flooded and these crops are going to be ruined. So we need to stop that. And they started that magical thought, mythical thoughts, and they look for answers. And they look for always, we have been like that as human beings. Something to blame.
Okay, it's good.
Something to blame.
I hate to say, this is where you're wrong. I'm presenting you the darkness, but humans are coming that are going to confront this, change it. You see, you wonder where some of the religions come from, the prophets? They emerge and they say, we want something better. We don't want necessarily this fear, this cruelty. We have a different matrix, a different paradigm, a different reality. They're coming, Maite. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
That this is the fear who force people to believe on religion. I have a funny thing that about India. In India, most of youngster who do not believe on religion, but they have a fear about their exam scores. I don't know how they start following religion and they start worshipping in their daily life. We never do a worship in whole semester, but during their exam they start their worshiping.
Well,
so I think that this is the fear who force people to believe on religion. Religion is
Sorry, David.
hope.
Say,
Yes.
religion is hope. Well, you see, I'm going to leave you this one thought and then we're going to end. William McNeill is studying early human history and trying to help us understand something what it means to be human before religion began to fill that. And he's telling us that at the beginning, we feared the natural world. We don't anymore. Oh, think about it. I just want you to think, it's a very powerful thing, and we will get to that in the 20th century, but in the single God religions that are about to emerge, that will become the world faiths, the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they will all have a single God at their core, a God you fear. There will be something else that will emerge after that. Religion actually came before science. Technology came first. Technology is picking up that stone 3 million years ago and beginning to shape it into a tool. So you get technology, you get religion, you get science. But once science starts to come, we're going to fear nature less. And we won't need to offer food, or as the Aztecs did in Mesoamerica, they would offer human sacrifice to the gods. We won't need to do that anymore because we won't fear God or the gods so much. We will have more faith in our own critical thinking to solve whatever problems the natural world presents. Now, if we didn't, here's what might happen today with climate change. We might say something like, we need to be praying more now to the God of the climate or to our one God in order for that to be reversed and for the world to cool down. We don't do that. We go, oh, how are we going to fix this? We did that with the ozone layer. In the 1990s, there was a big hole in the ozone layer. Now it's been fixed. It seems that in the Middle East right now, in the Holy Land, the Jew and the Arab, the fanatics, let's not talk about the Jews, the fanatics. This is about extremists, are at each other's throats. I think we will fix these things. It's much, much worse in the 20th century during the world wars. Can you imagine what we were living through then? It's terrible, but we got through it. But there will be a lot of suffering before then. Maite, and then just a second. I got to let everybody go. Maite, can you hold your? I'm just thinking about all the other students. Would you do me a favor and write this down and send it to me, and then I will review it with the class next week? Could you? Because your thoughts are important, but it's 10 to 2 and people have to go, and I see other things. So I want to thank you. I'm way behind, but at least I'm getting you some critical content today. Is this okay in the way I delivered things today for you? Yeah, because I know now did you? Okay, great. Because I know now the students watching the recording will then be able to get the critical content. Please think about William McNeill, Slaves of the Gods, and the Beginnings of Human Civilization and Social Differentiation. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you next week, okay? It's great. Okay. I'll take up the live chat comments, Lydia and others next week. Let me just save things before too many things to do here. And for some reason, my batteries. This is the missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ. This just came in for you. Are you? Thank you, David. Yeah. See you next week. Yep. Okay, good. So that's here. I need to stop the live stream in order for